it was a little bit like this, like in road cycling. When I first got a call, I'm like, holy shit, road cycling. I knew some of the guys
Yeah.
on the peloton back in the '90s.
What did you think? Were you like, I mean, what am I going to teach these guys? I mean, obviously,
Uh,
knew you could help them with some descents and stuff. Like what? Well, before, okay, pause the road. You said an interesting thing, like the way you do things. You just want to be good at something or put your best foot forward. But I think that's brilliant advice, especially if you're in a time in your life where you don't know what you do and you get a opportunity. Maybe it's not an opportunity forever, but just do it as good as a job and be proud of that. And if it fails or you decide to go another juncture, then so be it, right? So that was super interesting. But how do you make decisions? Like, what does your process look like for making these fork in the road decisions?
um, Obviously, a lot of the times have to do with, what are you competent with. If you feel like you're
Okay.
competent, it's like if you're competent or you have X abilities, it's like, okay, this is more like what I'm going to find, so I better do this. Uh, Obviously, there's something that's key, and I always felt like it's key. Is this, to me, I always work hard on the communication skill. To me, that is key. Whether you do one thing or the other. Wait a second. Let's see if I can turn this on. Excuse me one second. If the sun is bothering way better now. So the communication skill. If you're good at communicating, obviously it's gonna be easier for many things when you're working in your life also, but when you're working. So being able to communicate. For me, languages were also always really important. And then together with a set of abilities that is like, that's good. I can coach people. I can get to know the discipline in cycling, for example. If I jump from one discipline to the other, I look at the discipline and I say like, okay, they doing this way, why don't we try it this way? They doing this way, why don't we try it that way? A lot of the times, when you see stuff, even in downhill, I mean, and like in the past, I remember, like, I don't know if you remember the dropper seat post story. Many things are not being tried before, and people are scared to try, or they say like, I'll leave it. It's been always like this. It's not going to change anything. And sometimes I think you don't need to be scared of like trying. It's like, if you have enough, let's say like enough, if you can forecast, it's like, that's going to be good maybe for this, let's try that. And then you might be the first one, but it's maybe you're opening a way there. So I think these two, the abilities and the communication skill, which I always like really pay attention to be as good as I could, it's what's taking me like to pick up one direction in the once I got to the junction.
Yeah, that's, I mean, geez, yeah, good communication skills, just they go so far in life, in anything, sport, business, relationships. And so you mentioned the road thing. So, people might be learning of you and they can hear it's mountain biking and downhill, but you've done a lot of work with top road teams, and you're going to do that now with your new news. What's it like on the road side and with what you're working on? Like, what does that look like?
um I got called the first in 2012. So and I don't, it was 2012, yes, end of 2012, or let's say late summer 2012. Rabobank Giant. So Rabobank had a road team already for many years. I believe it was like their 13th or 14th season in the sport, and then decided to have. They were racing giant bikes. Back then, I was working in Giant, and they decided to call this guy because we're having people crashing and having too many injuries. And when they crashed, normally they were severe injuries. In downhill, sometimes you heard about broken femur, broken pelvis, and stuff like that. But most of the time, that doesn't happen. Most of the time, for the amount of crashing too. In road cycling, there is a lot of crashing. The volume of crashing is huge, but normally the people following road cycling, you cannot be at every single race, and there is so many races in the calendar. You have to be actually in the race car of a team to actually hear race radio telling like, crash, these two guys from this team, or crash, one guy from this team from the other, we crash a peloton, and they keep informing. And during a stage, you'll be shocked on how many people crashes. A lot of the times. So at first it was like a crashing scene. So I went there And again, it's like I got the call, and it's like, whoa, okay, let me think about it a second. I want to make sure I can actually bring something to the table to this instead of like throwing myself. I always call it like I'm just gonna like, you know, throw myself or dive into the pool. Let me check if there's water. If the swimming pool is full, at least half full. Half full. I'm not gonna jump in. There's no water. So um, I want to like I already had a couple friends that they raced in the peloton in the 90s. When I do my road rides back then, when I was racing downhill, I would go with them. And descending, they were like, quite bad. And so I thought, all these people, I think they could do better at doing this. So then already back then, riding my road bike, I would experiment a few things. And because of that, already like experience prior, together with some of the stuff, studying videos and stuff, I said like, okay, I'm just gonna like get probably a set of drills, understanding what those guys need, writing with them a little bit, and I make this kind of like this all this sketch, all this diagram. It's like, okay, I need this, I need that, I want to see this, and I can bring this and I can bring that for now. And then from there, I started understanding the sport a little bit more. So I brought already, so I did a presentation. I explained technique training and why and what can they get out of it and how was my plan to actually reinforce that, blah blah blah. And that was like a first phase. So I just hit the big meeting room of the Rabobank team back in 2012, 60 plus people, listening to my presentation. And the day after, like, I proved them obviously under the clock at one point, but that's not my first step or my first actually goal to do things under the clock. But they could see already, like, it's like, oh, okay, well, this guy's not that crazy. Obviously they had tires to test, and it's like, how are you going to test tires on the road? Can you tell me that? It's like, well, we don't know, we need to test. It's like, well, okay, let's figure out how can we test tires on road cycling. And one thing to the other, um, 12 years later, I've been with I don't know, I guess like most, not all of them, but most of the world tour teams, which has been super interesting because you get to the team, and as I said, like when you get to the team, a lot of the times you get to work with people, so you kind of go like quite deep into the team, so you understand the way they work, the way obviously those teams are structured of 120, 150 people sometimes, and you get into their organization and the way they organize, they do logistics, they communicate. That's what I see that is progress in downhill, because I see how those teams, they do it, and they are so professional. And it's been super enriching to get to know all of them, to get to know the different cultures in road cycling, if it's more like French or Italians, or it's more like American, Aussie, or Anglo culture of road cycling. So to me, it's been really amazing also seeing female road cycling really like growing the sport crazy. The evolution of women road cycling in the last 3 years has been huge.
Yeah, that's super fascinating because I've ridden down the back of Alpe d'Huez as a downhiller on a road bike, and I was actually quite terrifying. Like, you obviously have to push, and we weren't even pushing, but there's a few of the turns that I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If I just misjudged it, I was going a little bit too hot. Yeah, there's going to be huge crashes.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's free time, as getting better at downhill and gravity for XC and road. It's kind of a low hanging fruit if you can do it correctly, because it's free time. Like we spoke, like for them to increase 3 seconds on a 3 minute climb is going to take X amount of training and wattage up, like the technicalities of that. And then if you say, okay, I can give you 3 seconds over a 3 minute downhill, you're probably going to be able to get that way quicker.
Yes, but it's so much not in the sport. It's
Well, not in
like
the culture of the sport or what?
not on the culture of the
Like it's,
sport,
yeah,
and it's a sport that changes really slow. So at first,
the
when I was
road side.
there, yeah. So some of the guys after the first meeting, the coach that brought me there, he was a coach that signed for the team, and he came from triathlon. So he was like the coach of Jan Frodeno back then. So Jan Frodeno just got a silver medal at the Olympics, and then they signed him up for the team, and then he had a wider span. He would he would look at things like in a fisheye. He would look a lot more in perspective. He had a lot more vision than the road guys had a very narrow vision of what they were doing. And some of the stuff has been like it's been done like this always. We don't change it. That's the way it's been done. What are you talking about? And they
Yeah,
are
it
really
works.
defensive. Yeah, they're really exactly really classic in that style. So that classic, shape style. Sometimes you had, it's a thick shell they have, and you have to break in, slowly to actually, get your ideas in. As I said, like the evolution was like first it was like you guys were having accidents or crashes. They still do have, but that was the main concern. Then they were losing races downhilling. Now they're winning races downhilling. So that's a little bit the evolution after 12 years of road cycling. But if you look at the stages, because they say like, oh, you come from downhill mountain bike, you guys are crazy. So many people have told this so many times. Two things. The two things I've heard the most. You guys are crazy, and you guys drink beer and you don't need to train.
Yeah, and you're not fit.
Exactly. And I said like, well,
Yeah.
you drink beer if you won. I was never like a big beer drinker, but you drink beer if you want, but you cannot access that because obviously like it has consequences. Obviously, I mean, it doesn't go well with an athlete life. But you're not crazy. I said like you guys are the ones that are crazy because you go on lycras, you go fast down the hill on a road that you don't know under whatever I say weather condition, and you go on a bike that is the shittiest bike to descent
Yeah.
because it's everything is stiff. Back then, no disc brakes yet, and the tires are this thin. And on top of that, you do it with an ability that maybe might be not really a very good ability you have for descending, but also you don't work on it. You don't work on that ability. So that made things to me with like a very clear reading of what was happening. And some of them, there was actually like time and time and time for them to realize. Luckily nowadays, a lot of them they do understand that they need to work on, on this area, and really the a lot of the times when they sit down for the season, it's like, okay, we need to do things this, and then at the end, what happened this year was like, look at this crash here, this crash there, you got dropped here, you got dropped again there, you could not help your leader because you were dropped again. It's like you have to work on your skill. So skill is one more thing they need to do and need to understand and realize. But the evolution, disc brakes, I had the prototype disc brake bike, like the first pre-production ones, and you would go to a training camp, obviously with all these different teams, and every single team will say like, Oscar, that's for old people. That's maybe a Gran Fondo thing at the most. And I said like, you guys haven't tried this, but if you try this and you say it's shit, then try this shit thing for a couple months or even a month because you ride every day, and then you go back to your old rim brakes, and then you tell me. So
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah, then you
this
tell me.
with many things, also with the pressure. That was the first thing I you touch the tubes pressure, the tubulars. Back then, it's like they had 9 bars, no discretion on what the weather of the weight of the rider was. 9 bars, and it's like, well, this is like these are like rocks. There's like a no traction, zero capacity of absorbing. You're minimizing the grip. Yeah, but it rolls faster. Then I realized with wind tunnels and rolling that maybe decreasing the pressure will actually roll faster. It's like, well, there we go. And then instead of like 23s, they went 23s on width, 25th, 25, and now they are 28s even. So it's been evolving, but it's a really slow evolution, with very 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 hard to actually convince them to try things. Very 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 hard. Obviously, they have very little time too. I have to say that those teams are unbelievably busy. Those people, that the huge budget they have 3 teams in the men, for example. World Tour means like you have 3 different teams all times, same weekend. Sometimes they have 3 different races. The amount
Yeah.
of like personnel going left and right, cars, buses, trucks, it's unbelievable. So there's very little team to actually try time to try stuff and innovate. I would say it's very little time.